Ancient myth, to help you sleep: how ancient Sumerians invented happy hour. Welcome to Sumer After Dark. You arrive in bustling, you're dodging donkeys, as locals prepare for evening feasts. Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into the dusty streets of ancient Sumer, somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 years ago. It's late afternoon, the golden light clings stubbornly to the mud brick walls of and you're trying not to trip over a goat. The air smells like baked clay, roasted barley, and if we're being honest, a hint of sewage from the open canals. A donkey cart rumbles past, its driver shouting something you can't quite decipher over the sound of clogs slapping on packed earth. Children run barefoot, weaving between vendors, hawking dates and garlic, while a stray dog eyes the fig cake stacked high on a reed mat. You're here for one reason: happy hour. Though, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this one. Between the lukewarm beer, aggressive mosquitoes, and questionable street food, your 21st century immune system wouldn't stand a chance. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The streets of are alive. Merchants pack up their woven baskets, calling to neighbors to join them later at the tavern. The scent of roasted lamb mingles with dust kicked up by sandaled feet. Overhead, the sky shifts from a hazy amber to deep indigo, and lanterns begin flickering to life outside shop fronts. You catch sight of a woman pouring dark, frothy beer from a clay jug into wide, shallow bowls. It's not served in glasses. And forget about straws, though. Ironically, Sumerians did invent the straw, but mainly to avoid the chunks of barley floating in their beer. You're drawn to the sound of laughter echoing from behind a curtain of palm fronds. It's a tavern, or what passes for one here. Inside, low tables are crowded with laborers, merchants, even a stray priest or two, all eager for their post-work respite. The mud brick walls insulate the space, muffling the outside chaos, while the scent of fermenting grain hangs heavy in the air. You're invited to sit, and a wide-eyed boy brings you a bowl of beer so thick, you could almost chew it. This isn't just leisure. It's ritual. Beer is sacred here. To drink is to honor Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing. Every sip connects the people of to their gods, their ancestors, and each other. Historians still argue whether these early taverns were truly public spaces, or extensions of temple complexes. But for now, no one seems concerned about academic debates. Someone beside you breaks off a piece of flatbread, dips it into their beer, and gestures for you to try. The bread's nutty aroma blends with the earthy temps of the brew, surprisingly comforting despite its gritty texture. Outside, a flute begins to play a languid melody, and your eyelids grow heavy. It's only the first sip, and already you can feel the hum of ancient Sumerian life settling into your bones. As the night deepens, voices soften, lanterns glow brighter, and the breeze carries with it the promise of roasted onions and honey cakes. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays, and you realize you're beginning to enjoy the rhythm of this world. Beer for the gods, and you explore how Sumerians brewed thick, porridge-like beer, and offered it to deities. The boy with the wide eyes returns, this time carrying a heavy clay jug. He sets it down with a dull thud on the low wooden table, and warm, yeasty air escapes the mouth of the vessel. As he pours another bowl for you, thick foam gathers lazily along the edges, clinging stubbornly to the clay. This is no IPA or crisp Pilsner, it's closer to warm porridge than anything you've tasted. You cradle the bowl between your palms, noticing the faint fingerprint impressions of whoever crafted it. This isn't just any beverage. In Sumer, beer is life, literally. It's safer than water, which often carries all manner of unpleasant microbes, from the Tigris and Euphrates. Sumerian beer, brewed from barley and emmer wheat, undergoes fermentation that kills off most harmful bacteria. Historians still argue whether this was intentional wisdom or a lucky side effect, but either way, it kept entire cities hydrated and slightly tipsy. You take a cautious sip. It's thick, slightly sweet, with a sour undertone that prickles the back of your tongue. Tiny barley husks float in the murky liquid, and you try not to think about the fact that, back home, people pay a premium for unfiltered craft beers. Here, there's no other option. The woman pouring drinks earlier hums a familiar tune. She is a brewer, or maybe even a priestess. In Sumer, brewing isn't just domestic labor, it's sacred work. Ninkasi, the beer goddess, is invoked with every batch. One hymn to her etched into clay nearly 4,000 years ago actually doubles as a brewing recipe. It details soaking barley, fermenting it with bopir, a kind of barley bread, and straining it into large jars. You imagine chanting this hymn as you stir a cauldron, praying your beer doesn't turn sour. In this society, women dominate brewing. They are keepers of the craft and its rituals. Some own their own taverns, called sabru in Akkadian, where they serve bowls of beer to weary workers. These taverns are often small, low-lit, with a handful of benches, and reed mats for patrons. You shift uncomfortably on your own, reed mat there's no back support, and your legs are falling asleep. A man at the next table lifts his bowl in your direction. His beard is flecked with foam, his eyes glassy. To Ninkasi he says, or at least that's what you think he says. You raise your bowl in return, clinking the clay with a soft thud. The conversation drifts to grain shortages and temple politics. But you catch snippets of gossip, to who was seen leaving the brewer's house at dawn, which merchant watered down his beer and got fined. Apparently, in Sumer tavern keepers are held accountable for the strength and purity of their brews. Selling weak beer can land you in serious trouble with temple officials. A lyre begins to play somewhere in the room, its sleepy plucking mingling with murmured voices and the occasional soft laugh. Someone nearby snores gently, already drifting off in the warm haze of fermented grain and flickering oil lamps. You lean back against the cool mud brick wall, tracing faint etchings, perhaps graffiti from past patrons, and wonder how many people before you sat right here, bowl in hand, sharing a toast to gods and life alike. Outside, night has fully fallen. The air is cooler now, and the faint croak of frogs rises from a nearby canal. You take another sip and let the earthy, bready flavors linger. This isn't just beer. It's communion with an ancient world. The world's first taverns. Step inside a dim reed-roofed tavern, where weary workers gather after sundown. The clay bowl is nearly empty when the door flap rustles again, letting in a breath of cooler night air and a pair of laborers, covered in dust from the fields. Their sandals slap against the packed earth floor, as they call out greetings, their voices carrying the familiar weary joy of men who've survived another scorching day under the Sumerian sun. One gestures broadly, asking the brewer for 2 bowls, and she obliges without looking up, her hands practiced from years of repetition. You watch as she reaches for a large, squat jar propped against the wall. The liquid inside sloshes heavily, dark and opaque. Using a long-handled ladle, she fills each bowl with practiced ease. This is a tavern, but not in the way you might imagine. There's no bar counter, no polished stools. Instead, the room is open and dim, lit by the flickering glow of oil lamps mounted in clay niches. Reed mats cover the floor, and low wooden tables are scattered about like afterthoughts. In these spaces, Sumerians gather not just to drink, but to unwind, gossip, and, occasionally, scheme. Historians still debate whether these sabru were purely commercial establishments, or semi-sacred extensions of temple life. What's clear is their importance as community hubs, especially for men without families nearby. The atmosphere is calm tonight, though it's not hard to imagine louder, rowdier evenings when the room brims with merchants, boasting of profits, and farmers arguing over field boundaries. One man breaks into a drunken rendition of a hymn, his voice warbling like a reed flute. May Ninkasi pour her beer, as flowing as the Tigris, as sweet as date syrup. A few patrons chuckle softly. The brewer shakes her head with mock disapproval, but can't hide her grin. The hymn, you realize, isn't just poetry, it's a fragment of a larger tradition, where drinking and worship intertwine. Beer is offered to the gods, consumed by temple staff, and distributed to workers as part of their wages. In fact, some workers are paid entirely in beer-thick rations, called sikaru, that sustain them as much as they satisfy. A clay tablet leaning against the wall catches your eye. It's etched with neat cuneiform wedges. Perhaps it's an inventory of barley supplies, or a list of unpaid bar tabs. Yes, tabs existed even then. Clay tokens tracked debts and credit in taverns. Imagine trying to settle your bill with a handful of clay tokens after a long night of drinking. The murmur of voices fades briefly as a boy pads quietly across the room to refill oil lamps. Their glow grows stronger again, flickering shadows dancing across the mud brick walls. The laborers settle on a reed mat near the door, bowls in hand, their laughter blending with the soft twang of a lyre. Outside, you hear a donkey bray, then silence except for the faint chirp of insects. You take a deep breath, feeling the weight of the warm, Humid air, scented with malted wood smoke. The world outside may be full of hard labor and political intrigue, but here, for a brief hour or two, there's only the shared comfort of fermented grain, familiar faces, and the steady rhythm of ancient life. Clay tokens and running tabs. Discover how clay tablets recorded bar tabs long before credit cards existed. The brewer shuffles past you, arms full of small clay tokens, stacked neatly like poker chips. She kneels in the corner and begins arranging them on a low table, muttering numbers under her breath. You lean closer and see that each token is etched with tiny symbols, cuneiform shorthand for quantities of beer owed. This is bookkeeping, Sumerian style. Here, debts aren't scribbled on napkins or tracked by smartphone apps. Instead, bar tabs live on clay tablets, baked hard by the heat of the kiln. Workers leave their marks, a stylized reed symbol for their name, maybe on promise to pay when the next barley harvest comes in, if they're lucky. This practice wasn't unique to taverns. In Sumerian society, clay tokens recorded everything: wages, trades, taxes, even fines. A merchant's wallet might be nothing more than a small pouch of these lumps, each standing for a goat, a bushel of barley, or tonight a few bowls of beer. One man at a nearby table runs a calloused finger along his own tablet, lips moving silently as he calculates. He grins suddenly, perhaps realizing his debt isn't as bad as feared. Or maybe he's had enough beer that numbers no longer matter. Historians still argue whether these tavern debts were enforced strictly, or forgiven in temple-led amnesties. Either way, the tokens represent an astonishingly advanced financial system for a civilization so ancient. The brewer sighs and rubs her temples. Keeping track of who owes what isn't easy, especially when customers drink more than they can afford. The penalties for losing track are steep. Temple officials can fine a sabrew severely if records go awry, or worse if beer is watered down. Speaking of watered down, you overhear a farmer grumble as he swirls his bowl. He's joking, but only partly. In Sumer, beer purity is taken seriously. Tavern keepers accused of dilution risk not just fines, but public humiliation. Some texts suggest punishments as severe as flogging, or being forced to drink their own weak beer. Hardly a pleasant thought. But there's no sign of trouble tonight. Instead, the atmosphere feels unhurried, meditative even. A merchant lounges with his head resting on folded arms, eyes half closed as a lyre player plucks a gentle, repetitive tune. You can feel the rhythm seeping into your own bones, your breathing slowing to match its pace. The tokens on the brewer's table gleam faintly in the lamplight. Clay, beer, barley, ink, these humble materials have built an entire social web that keeps Sumer running. You trace the outline of a nearby token with your finger, feeling its cool, rough surface. This little object holds the weight of a transaction, a promise, a memory of two people agreeing over frothy bowls. Outside, a cool breeze flutters the reed curtain at the entrance. You catch a glimpse of the moon, pale and swollen, reflected in the sluggish canal waters. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howls, quickly silenced by a sharp whistle. You settle back against the wall, clay bowl in hand, the earthy scent of barley and yeast grounding you in this ancient moment. Snack like a Sumerian taste: garlicky stews, dates and roasted locusts, served alongside frothy beer bowls. A soft clatter pulls your attention to the corner of the tavern. A wooden tray is being set down, laden with dishes that steam and sizzle faintly even in the warm air. The aroma drifts toward you, savory, rich, and utterly foreign yet somehow comforting. It's time for food. Sumerian taverns aren't just places to drink. They're also casual eateries. The boy with the wide eyes returns, this time balancing a bowl of thick stew, so fragrant you feel your mouth water. He places it gently in front of you. The surface glistens with oil, dotted with tender chunks of lamb, garlic, and leeks. A wedge of flatbread rests on the edge of the bowl, still warm from the clay oven. You tear a piece of bread and scoop up a mouthful. It's hearty, spiced with coriander and cumin, with a tang that suggests it sat simmering for hours over a low fire. Historians still debate how standardized these recipes, or was every stew unique to its tavern? Or did temple kitchens set culinary trends across the city-states? Whatever the case, it's delicious. Around the room, patrons tuck into their own plates: dried fish, drizzled with date syrup, roasted onions, stuffed with lentils, and a surprising favorite: crispy locusts, fried in sesame oil, until their shells crackle between the teeth. A man across from you pops one into his mouth with a grin, offering the bowl your way. You politely decline, But he shrugs as if to say, more for me. Food in Sumer wasn't only sustenance, it was status. The wealthy dined on lamb and fish, their dishes seasoned with imported spices from as far as the Indus Valley. Ordinary laborers relied on barley, porridge, and onions. Tonight, in this cozy tavern, the lines blur. Even the humblest worker savors a bowl of stew after a long day in the fields. At the next table, a group of women laugh softly, sharing dates from a woven basket. Their fingers are sticky with the sugary fruit, and one of them licks her thumb, before reaching for another. A few children dart in from the street, eyes bright as they beg scraps from patrons. A kindly merchant breaks off a corner of his bread and tosses it their way. The brewer reappears, this time holding a tray of honey cakes. They're small, round, and slightly charred at the edges, their surfaces glistening with syrup. She sets them down with a thud, and immediately hands reach for the treats. One man crumbles his cake into his beer bowl, swirling the mixture lazily before taking a long sip. The combination seems odd, but he sighs in contentment, so perhaps it's an acquired taste. You pause between bites to listen. The room hums with quiet conversation, punctuated by the occasional clink of clay against wood. Outside, a night breeze rustles the palm fronds and carries the faint smell of river mud. Somewhere nearby, a vendor calls out the last of his wares, his voice growing faint as he disappears into the labyrinthian alleys of your. Here in the tavern, time feels suspended. The stew warms your belly, the bread's rough texture lingers on your fingertips, and the beer's yeasty sweetness still coats your tongue. You lean back, drowsy, as the soft glow of oil lamps paints the walls in flickering amber. It's not hard to imagine yourself a regular returning night after night for the same stew, the same laughter, the same quiet camaraderie. Temple parties and drunken hymns join priests and priestesses as they host raucous temple feasts, honoring Ninkasi, goddess of beer. Somewhere behind you, a bell-like chime rings out to hollow reeds struck together. The sound ripples through the tavern, quieting the chatter just enough for the music to begin again. This time, it's no casual tune. A pair of priestesses step into the room, their flowing linen robes catching the lamplight as they settle onto reed mats near the center. One carries a small frame drum, the other a delicate lyre cradled against her shoulder. Their presence signals something more than entertainment. You're about to witness a temple feast, though here, in Sumer, such events blur the lines between religious ritual and a proper party. Ninkasi, goddess of beer and brewing, is being honored tonight. The priestess with the drum begins tapping out a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The lyre joins in with delicate plucked notes that seem to hang in the warm air. Patrons quiet their voices, some bowing their heads respectfully, others swaying gently in time to the music. A few already look glassy-eyed from their earlier drinks, but even they straighten slightly as the hymn begins. Ninkasi, you are the one who bakes the bop here with honey, you are the one who waters the malt set on the ground. The words drift lazily through the room, carried by the priestess's soft voice. This isn't a dry recital. It's alive, meant to soothe and celebrate, much like the beer itself. You sip from your bowl, feeling the rhythm seep into your bones, your breath slowing as though lulled by some ancient spell. Historians still debate how much of these feasts were solemn ritual versus social occasion. To the Sumerians, there's no clear distinction. Drinking beer is a form of worship. Sharing it with neighbors reinforces social bonds. Even drunkenness, in moderation, is seen as a divine blessing, a sign that Ninkasi's gifts are being fully appreciated. The drumbeat quickens briefly, prompting a murmur of excitement. A few patrons begin clapping along, their palms striking thighs and tabletops. Someone near the door produces a pair of reed pipes, adding a high, reedy counterpoint to the lyre's soothing tones. The sound is strange, almost otherworldly to your modern ears, yet deeply calming. As the music fills the tavern, trays of food and beer continue circulating. The brewer herself takes a moment to sit near the priestesses, her expression serene. For her, and for every sabrew, these gatherings are sacred. To brew beer well is to honor Ninkasi. To host a tavern where the community gathers is an act of service not just to neighbors, but to the gods themselves. At the far side of the room, a man begins singing drunkenly along to the hymn. Slightly off-key, but with infectious enthusiasm. His companions shush him between stifled laughs, though no one seems genuinely annoyed. In Sumer, even slightly raucous joy has its place in the sacred order of things. The final notes of the hymn linger in the air as the priestesses rise. With a graceful nod, They slip out into the night, leaving behind a room that feels both lighter and heavier, the weight of ritual giving. Way to the gentle buzz of satisfied drinkers. Outside, the moon hangs low and golden over the city walls. The sounds of distant lyres and soft laughter drift in from neighboring taverns, carried on the cool Euphrates breeze. Here in the lamplight, with a full belly and half-full bowl, you realize you're part of something that stretches back millennia, happy hour that began before history even had a name. Music of the lyres and pipes. Listen as ancient musicians soothe drinkers with sleepy lyre melodies and hollow reed flutes. The tavern is quieter now, wrapped in the thick, drowsy haze that settles in after a round of hymns and heavy stews. Across the room, a man plucks a lyre lazily, its delicate notes rising and falling, like ripples on the Euphrates. The sound is hypnotic, pulling at your eyelids in time with the slow strum of gut strings. Music is as essential to Sumerian taverns as beer and bread. A good lyre player can lull a room into serene silence or stir it into cheerful clapping. Tonight, the vibe is firmly in the former camp. The musician closes his eyes, swaying slightly, fingers dancing over the strings. Next to him, an older man leans against the mud brick wall, cradling a double reed pipe. When he brings it to his lips, a thin, breathy sound drifts into the air, weaving around the lyre's tones like a snake through tall reeds. It's not a melody you recognize, modern scales haven't been invented yet, but there's a strange beauty to its slow, wandering rise and fall. These instruments are simple by today's standards, lyres of wood and gut string, pipes hollowed from reeds, small frame drums covered in animal hide, yet they fill the tavern with life. Their sound as essential to Sumerian evenings as the flicker of oil lamps and the clink of clay bowls. You watch as a woman at a nearby table hums along, tapping a slow beat on her knees. She wears her hair in long braids, adorned with tiny beads that catch the lamplight as she sways. Even the children who've slipped in from the street are quiet, lulled by the gentle harmony. Historians still debate how formal these tavern performances were. Were musicians hired specifically to entertain drinkers, or were they patrons themselves, offering a tune in exchange for a bowl of beer? Whatever the arrangement, their presence turns an ordinary evening into something richer, softer, more memorable. The lyre player shifts to a faster rhythm briefly, and a few patrons stomp their feet in time. Laughter bubbles up in one corner, though it's warm and mellow, rather than raucous. You get the sense that Sumerian taverns could swing from sleepy to rowdy, and back again in a heartbeat, depending on the night, the company, and the amount of beer flowing from those squat jars. Your own clay bowl is nearly empty, but you hesitate to call for more. Instead, you let the flavors of yeast and barley linger on your tongue, as the pipe's notes spiral upward, dissolving into silence. Outside, the night air carries the scent of wet earth and distant woods. Somewhere beyond the tavern's reed curtain, you hear another lyre being tuned, the faint sound echoing through the narrow streets. Music is everywhere here. Even in the temples, priests play for the gods, offering hymns alongside libations of beer and wine. Inside, the final chord hangs in the air. The pipe player lowers his instrument, smiling faintly, and the lyre falls silent. A wave of contentment ripples through the room, no applause, just the soft exhale of dozens of people wrapped in the warm glow of food, drink, and song. You shift on your reed mat, noticing how heavy your limbs feel. Maybe it's the beer, maybe it's the music, but either way, your body has started sinking to the slow, gentle rhythms of this ancient world. Flirting in cuneiform. Watch locals exchange flirty clay tablets and gossip over honey cakes and ale. The music has faded to a quiet memory, replaced now by soft murmurs and the occasional chuckle. Across the room, a pair of young men lean close over a shared bowl of beer, shoulders touching as they whisper and laugh. Their conversation is peppered with sly glances toward a table of women sitting near the entrance. Flirting in ancient Sumer is a delicate art, less swiping right, more scratching tiny symbols onto wet clay. One of the young men reaches into a small leather pouch and produces a thumb-sized tablet. Its surface damp enough to receive a stylus. He begins etching something with quick, confident strokes, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Historians still argue whether these love tablets were common practice or rare artifacts of wealthy scribes, but here it seems as natural as sending a text. You watch as he finishes, blows gently to dry the clay, then hands the token to a barefoot child who's been hanging around for scraps of bread. The boy scampers over to the women's table and presents it with a mischievous grin. The recipient, a woman with dark braids and gold hoops in her ears, raises an eyebrow, reading the tiny wedges by the light of an oil lamp. A smile tugs at her lips. She looks up, meets the sender's gaze across the room, and raises her bowl in a subtle toast. This isn't the only method of courtship. You've already heard enough gossip tonight to know the brewer keeps a mental ledger of who's been sneaking out after hours, with whom. Some patrons are more overt, reciting lines from love poems as they offer honey cakes and extra bowls of beer. Others, perhaps wiser, let the alcohol do the talking, their shy glances growing bolder with each sip. Nearby, a woman in a blue linen shawl is being teased gently by two friends about her secret admirer. She covers her face with her hands, laughing, but you catch her stealing a look toward a scribe seated at the far corner. He, in turn, scratches nervously at his beard, as if debating whether to send over his own clay token. Food, drink, and flirting, this trinity of tavern life keeps your social gears turning. Even in these small interactions, alliances are formed, rivalries sparked, and futures quietly decided. Marriage contracts might be drawn up tomorrow in a scribe's house. But tonight, under the warm glow of oil lamps and the mellow buzz of barley beer, everything feels lighter, softer, full of possibility. Your own clay bowl is empty again. You consider asking for more, but decide against it. A pleasant heaviness has settled over you, like a blanket, and you're content to simply observe the slow dance of Sumerian social life. Outside, faint sounds of the city drift in, a distant flute, the creak of a donkey cart, the soft slap of sandals on packed earth. Inside, the tavern hums, with quiet laughter, murmured confessions, and the occasional hiss of roasted onions, being refreshed over a low fire. You close your eyes briefly, imagining the clay tablet messages that might accumulate over one evening, teeny records of longing, humor, and fleeting connections pressed into wet clay for the gods, and occasionally the brewer to witness. Odd pub rules and peculiar punishments. Learn why tavern keepers feared fines for watering down beer. The air in the tavern feels denser now, heavy with the mingled scents of barley beer, roasted garlic, and warm bodies pressed close on reed mats. It's a cozy atmosphere, but not without its rules that every patron and brewer knows better than to break. At the far end of the room, a small commotion has begun. A young man slams his clay bowl on the table, amber beer sloshing dangerously close to the edge. It's weak, he declares loudly, his words slightly slurred. The room hushes. Eyes flick toward the brewer, who pauses mid-step with a tray of honey cakes in hand. In Sumer, such accusations aren't just bad manners, they're dangerous. Tavern keepers are legally bound to serve beer, at its proper strength. Selling watered down or sour beer can earn a salbrew fines, loss of license, or worse. One ancient legal text even suggests the ultimate penalty for repeat offenders, drowning in their own brew. Historians still argue whether that punishment was symbolic or literal, but either way, you make a mental note not to get on a brewer's bad side. The brewer approaches the table calmly, her linen robe brushing the floor. She leans down, takes the young man's bowl, and inspects the remaining liquid. With a stern look, she beckons him to taste it again. He hesitates, then takes a cautious sip, his bravado fading as quickly as the foam on his beer. "It's fine," he mutters, sheepishly. The tension breaks as a ripple of laughter fills the room. Someone teases, "Next time, drink slower, you might even taste it." But the incident is a reminder that taverns have unspoken codes of conduct. Insults, fights, and excessive drunkenness aren't tolerated. The brewer's reputation depends on keeping her space orderly and her beer untainted. She is part businesswoman, part priestess, part peacekeeper. As for punishments, they aren't reserved for brewers alone. Patrons caught cheating on their bar tabs might be forced to work off their debts, hauling water, or scrubbing floors. One local legend even tells of a man tied to a brewing vat for a full day as a warning. True or not, the image is vivid enough to make you sit a little straighter on your reed mat. Across the room, a group of older men discuss temple regulations in hushed tones. One gestures animatedly, his hand describing a circle, as he explains how beer taxes fund canal repairs. Another snorts, muttering that the temple officials drink half the taxes before a single brick is laid. The others chuckle, but don't disagree. You glance at your empty bowl, fingers tracing the faint ridges left by the potter's hands. Here, in this place where rules and rituals overlap, even a simple drink carries weight. Each sip binds brewer and patron in a delicate social contract, enforced not by bouncers or police, but by temple scribes, and a collective understanding of fairness. Outside, a dog barks once, sharply, then falls silent. The night air smells faintly of damp earth and reed smoke, carried in through the open doorway. The momentary tension has passed, replaced once again by low laughter and the soothing hum of quiet conversation. You lean back, letting the warmth of the room seep into your bones. Grateful that in this ancient world, even in a bustling tavern, order is maintained, and the beer keeps flowing. Moonlight markets and beer politics. Stroll past moonlit stalls, where beer taxes shaped Sumer's economy and power struggles. You hear the faint jingle of coins, or rather, clay tokens outside the reed curtain. Two men step into the tavern, cloaks smelling of river mist. They carry baskets balanced on their shoulders, their movements careful and deliberate. These are merchants fresh from the moonlight markets, where Sumer's economy thrums long after the sun sets. In the streets beyond, stalls still glow under flickering oil lamps. Women haggle over bundles of garlic and reeds. Men examine freshly baked papier loaves, destined for tomorrow's brewing. But here in the tavern, the conversation shifts to more serious topics: beer politics. A scribe, his fingers stained with ink, leans forward to explain how beer taxes have shaped the city's fortunes. It's not just drink, he says with a wry smile, it's power. In Sumer, beer is not merely sustenance or pleasure, it's currency. Workers are paid in beer rations, priests receive offerings of it, and temple treasuries overflow with jars of the frothy brew. The merchant next to him nods. The temple takes its share of every batch brewed. Even donkeys hauling grain pay, in their way. His eyes crinkle with amusement at his own joke, though you're left wondering whether donkey tax is a metaphor or some ancient reality. Historians still argue about the extent of temple control over taverns. Were they independent businesses, or merely outposts of temple wealth? The brewer returns, setting down a fresh bowl before the scribe. This batch is darker, richer, likely brewed from malt roasted longer, over embers. You catch a whiff of something sweet, date syrup, perhaps added to mellow the bitterness. The scribe lifts the bowl to his lips, sighing appreciatively. Outside, a faint clamor rises as another tavern empties its patrons into the narrow alleys. Lantern light glints off wet cobblestones, and shadows flicker as night market vendors pack away their goods. Inside, the talk grows quieter, but more intense. Merchants swap stories of taxes levied on barley shipments, of temple officials inspecting their grain with eagle eyes. One recalls a time when a king decreed all beers sold at a fixed price, only for a black market to flourish overnight. Another laughs at the memory of a brewer accused of hoarding beer during a drought, forced to open her storehouses under the watchful eyes of half the city. Meanwhile, trays of food continue to circulate: grilled fish, bowls of lentil porridge, and small clusters of dates. Patrons eat slowly now, savoring each bite as the night deepens. The oil lamps burn lower, their light softening the mud brick walls into warm ochre tones. You sip from your own bowl, the flavor mellow and earthy, and listen to the hum of conversation. Even in this ancient setting, it's clear: beer is politics, beer is economy, beer is life. And as long as the taverns stay open and the moonlight markets bustle, the delicate balance of Sumer's happy hour will continue. The reed curtain flutters as a breeze slips in, carrying the faint scent of onions and warm barley. You settle deeper into your reed mat, lulled by the soft sounds of a civilization, negotiating its future one frothy bowl at a time. Festival nights and rowdy revelry, witness the chaos of citywide festivals, where even kings stumbled home tipsy. By now, the air in the tavern feels as thick as the beer, warm, fragrant, heavy with barley and lamp smoke. Your limbs feel loose, your eyelids tugged downward by a pleasant weight. Around you, the energy has shifted again. The earlier chatter has softened into murmurs, and laughter has thinned into the occasional chuckle, drifting like smoke across the room. Near the corner, two men sit hunched over a small clay tablet. By the glow of an oil lamp, they trace cuneiform symbols with delicate styluses, whispering as they work. These aren't love notes or bar tabs. These are brewing records. In Sumer, brewing isn't guesswork. It's a precise craft, hand, a lucrative one. Recipes are memorized, chanted, even recorded in hymns like the famous hymn to Ninkasi, which doubles as a step-by-step guide. Soak malted barley, mix with papier bread, ferment, strain, repeat, fail to get it right. And not only will your beer sour, your reputation will too. The brewer glides past with a fresh jug balanced on her hip, her robes catching the lamplight. Her face is unreadable, but her movements tell a story. Efficient, practiced, and filled with the quiet pride of someone who knows her skill, keeps half the city hydrated and, a little buzzed. Historians still debate whether brewers guarded their recipes like trade secrets, or shared them freely, as temple knowledge. Here, it seems to be both. The men in the corner whisper about a new mixture, touch more emmer wheat, a touch less pepper too, create a smoother brew. One of them smiles slyly, his eyes darting toward the brewer, as though he's discussing a minor heresy. At the next table, a group of younger patrons argue over which tavern in your serves the strongest beer. One swears by a place near the ziggurat, another insists that a riverside sobrew brews with water from a sacred well, giving her beer a holy kick. A third shrugs and says, it all tastes the same after 3 bowls. You swirl the dregs of your own drink, noticing the bits of husk that have settled at the bottom. It's coarse, unfiltered, yet oddly satisfying and earthy, bready flavor that reminds you of the world outside, sun-baked fields, ripening barley, and temple storehouses filled to their ceilings. The oil lamps gutter slightly, as the boy makes his rounds, trimming wicks and adding a splash of oil. Shadows dance across the walls, the flicker of flame turning the clay etchings and graffiti into animated whispers of past patrons. Someone once scratched the shape of a fish here, another a crude smiling face. You wonder what their nights in this tavern were like, what conversations and secrets hung in the air back then, as they do now. The brewer sets down her jug and wipes her hands on her apron. She exchanges a few quiet words with the priestess who's just arrived, a sign that another hymn might soon fill the room. Outside, the distant croak of frogs rises from the canals. Somewhere, a donkey brays half-heartedly. You shift slightly on your reed mat, feeling a deep, settling calm. This place, mud brick walls, flickering lamps, murmured voices, bowls of thick beer isn't just a tavern. It's a heartbeat of ancient life, as vital and regular as the rivers themselves. When beer saved lives, hear how Sumerian beer purified water and kept whole cities from sickness. The tavern feels even warmer now, as though the walls themselves have soaked up centuries of laughter, spilled beer, and quiet confessions. You notice a faint etching near your shoulder, a cuneiform wedge shaped like a star. Someone long ago scratched it into the mud brick, perhaps, a scribe marking his favorite drinking spot, or maybe a lovesick laborer, leaving his own small legacy. At a nearby table, a pair of merchants lean close over their bowls, voices low but animated. They're discussing trade routes, barley from the north, sesame oil from the south, and the prized lapis lazuli stones, ferried in from distant lands. For them, beer isn't just an end-of-day luxury. It's a transactional lubricant. Deals are struck over bowls of frothy brew. Promises are made, alliances forged. Historians still argue how much actual commerce happened in taverns versus temples. But here, it's obvious business and pleasure are impossible to separate. The merchants break off pieces of flatbread, dunking them absently in their beer, as they talk margins and shipments. Occasionally, one scratches notes into a small clay tablet with his stylus, the faint scratching sound oddly soothing. On the other side of the room, a group of farmers debate temple regulations on water rights. One slaps the table as he insists the canals are clogged because priests divert too much flow for their barley fields. His companion shakes his head, mumbling that without temple barley, there'd be no beer. Both are too tired and too tipsy to argue for long. Meanwhile, the brewer watches it all with a practiced eye. She circulates slowly, checking bowls, exchanging quiet words, smoothing over the occasional rising voice. Her role is more than pouring drinks. She is hostess, mediator, even a kind of community anchor. Without her, the conversations, the deals, the laughter, they'd all falter. A fresh tray of honey cakes appears, their sticky sweetness filling the air. A boy delivers them with a shy grin, and you realize these moments of sharing passing food, refilling bowls are as vital as the beer itself. The room shifts again, as a soft hymn begins in the corner. A priestess has returned, her voice low and melodic, accompanied by the gentle pluck of a lyre. The words praise Ninkasi, reminding everyone that their contentment tonight flows from divine hands. You listen, the syllables foreign yet comforting, their rhythm pulling you deeper into the warm haze of beer and music. Outside, the night air is cooler now. A faint mist rises from the canal, carrying the scent of wet reeds. You catch a glimpse of the moon between the reed curtains, a pale crescent, hanging low in the sky. Its light reflected in the sluggish waters. Back inside, someone snores softly in the corner, his bowl tipped precariously on its side. A companion gently rights it, covering the man with a reed mat, before returning to his own drink. Even in this bustling space, there's a quiet thread of care weaving through every gesture. You take another sip, feeling the grainy texture of unfiltered beer coat your tongue. The flavor is rich, earthy, and oddly grounding. Here, under the watchful eye of Ninkasi, and the steady hand of the brewer, life slows to a gentle, ancient rhythm. The morning after in Uruk, follow hungover scribes, staggering to work, muttering about dreams of golden beer rivers. He lamps are burning lower now, their lights soft and amber, stretching shadows long across the mud-brick walls. Most of the reed mats have been abandoned as patrons drift out into the cool night air. A few remain, heads resting on folded arms, caught between the edges of wakefulness and sleep. The brewer wipes down tables with a damp cloth, her movements quiet and deliberate. She pauses now and then to adjust a jar, gather a stray token, or nudge a gently snoring laborer toward a more comfortable position. There's no hurry. In Sumerian taverns, closing time is less a rule than a gradual unwinding. Outside, the sounds of the city have thinned to a few scattered voices, the soft clop of donkey hooves, and the faint rush of water in the canals. The scent of wet earth and palm fronds drifts through the open doorway. You sip the last of your beer, now warm and slightly bitter at the bottom of the bowl. It's tempting to call for one more, but your limbs are heavy, your thoughts thick with barley and song. The boy with the wide eyes, now nearly asleep on his feet, collects empty bowls and stacks them carefully. One of the merchants slips him a small clay token as a tip, and the boy's face lights up with tired gratitude. Near the entrance, the priestess who sang earlier is helping another patron wrap himself in his shawl. Her voice, low and kind, carries a simple blessing for safe travels. May Ninkasi walk with you. It's a small ritual, yet it feels weighty, as though even leaving a tavern in Sumer requires divine notice. Historians often describe these places as chaotic dens of vice. But sitting here in the soft glow of oil lamps, surrounded by the scent of roasted grain and the faint murmur of sleepy voices, it feels more like a sanctuary. A place where the lines between sacred and mundane blur. The brewer catches your eye and offers a small, knowing smile. It's the look of someone who's seen countless nights like this, who's watched strangers become friends. Lovers exchange cautious glances, and workers plot new ventures over bowls of thick, yeasty beer. You rise slowly, your legs stiff from hours on the reed mat. The air outside is cooler, scented with night-blooming flowers and river mist. In the distance, the ziggurat looms against the starry sky, its dark silhouette faintly glowing from torches at its summit. As you step out, the murmur of the tavern fades behind you, replaced by the quiet rhythm of your own footsteps on packed earth. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks lazily. You pause, breathing in the ancient night, feeling the hum of a civilization that has carried you gently through its happy hour. In a few hours, the city will stir again, merchants shouting in markets, bakers firing clay ovens, and brewers beginning the sacred work of transforming barley and water into life-giving beer. But for now, all is still. You glance back once at the reed curtain swaying in the doorway. The tavern waits, ready to welcome another night's worth of stories, laughter, and bowls of beer.